Hi, this is Mike Eisenberg, working on a series of vodcasts on information literacy. And this is the third in the series, and this one is on accountability in information literacy programs, and it's a really important area. As with the others, I've collected some questions from students here at the university and from colleagues around the country, teachers, teacher librarians, technology teachers, and I've kind of put them in an order that'll help to work on the flow. But first, let me just review again what we mean by information literacy, which is, shorthand for information literacy is the Big Six. And the Big Six are the stages of information problem solving. There's task definition, we define the problem and the information needed for the problem. Information seeking strategies, we determine all possible sources and then the specific source that's best in this particular situation. Location and access, where we find the source and then find the information in the source. Use of information, really hard stage where we have to comprehend through engaging, reading, viewing, listening, and then extracting what's relevant and credible. Synthesis, where we organize the information and then present. And finally, stage number 6, where we judge the product, the end result, as well as judging the process. Now, these stages aren't always linear and in order and kids jump around and whatever, but successful information problem solving requires success on each of these stages. So let's see what kind of questions come up in relation to accountability and information literacy. The first one says, what do you mean by information literacy and accountability, Mike? What is accountability? Great question. I think of accountability in 4 ways. I think of it in terms of comprehensiveness, being comprehensive, being predictable, being measured, and being reported. In terms of comprehensive, I mean that an information literacy curriculum really needs to cover every grade level in a school setting. So if it's a K-5 school, it means information literacy on each level, and that it is predictable and that we know what it is. So we know that in grade 1, we have expectations that are met every year, and the classroom teacher, the parents, the teacher librarian, the technology teachers can rely on that. And that's what I mean by being comprehensive, that it's for each grade year, and predictable means that the same skills, with some adjustments, of course, but just like the math curriculum, just like English, language arts, just like science, social studies, music, art, whatever, all the curricular areas, including information literacy, have expectations that we focus on each year. That comprehensive and predictable. The third part of accountability is measured. We need to find ways to measure success in information literacy the way that we do in other areas. And after we've got the grade level expectation, we need to determine techniques for measuring and the evidence that we're going to use for that measurement. I'm going to talk about this a little further as we go through here. And finally, reported. Reported meaning, how do we report this out? In most places, there's no line item on the report card that says information literacy, although I think there should be, and I think we need to push towards that. But in lieu of that, how do we report things out? And again, I'll talk about that in just a moment. So the second question that relates to that, it relates to more of the comprehensive part of this, is what about the standards, Mike? What about the national, state, the local standards? What about the standards from the Partnership for 21st Century Skills? What about the American Association of School Librarians? What about the ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education? What about those standards? Well, I say they're great. I mean, each one has a valuable contribution. However, they're overwhelming. And they're very complex, and there's lots of stuff in there. And what I would say, we need to sift through those, show how they link, but then to move on to some very specific local implementations of the standards. How do you do that? The way you do it is the Big Six. the Big Six relates to all these standards. It relates to the partnership, to AASL, to various state standards. And so that's the way that I think that we can determine and put standards to work for us in our local situations to identify those grade level expectations in terms of information literacy. What do we expect fourth graders to do in terms of use of information 4.2, which is note-taking? What do we expect eighth graders to do in relation to 4.2, use of information, and so forth? Another question had to do with the measurement side of it. So Mike, how do we measure that, and how do we do it without taking up a lot of time? Because classroom teachers, teacher librarians, technology folks, everybody's really busy. Well, to me, this is the major challenge for this year and next year, and that is for us to have a national conversation about various techniques of measurement for the very specific grade level expectations of information literacy. Now, I have some ideas that I can share with that. For example, information seeking strategies. We're interested in determining are kids able to brainstorm sources and then narrow to the best. One of the ways to do that is on projects and reports and papers is to have the bibliographies that they do be annotated bibliographies where they put a sentence under each entry that states why did they select that entry. And then the classroom teacher or the teacher librarian can very quickly go down and give an assessment of whether or not the students succeeded in information seeking strategies. That's a pretty general one that could be used in a lot of different situations. In use of information, right? Engaging, reading, and extracting relevant information and credible information, I like to use the standardized tests that the kids are already taking. Because there are questions on those tests. You look at your state exams and you will see a question that says to the kids, read the passage that follows and then answer the questions. And in my experience, there are at least 2 questions in every reading that relate to information literacy. There's usually a question that relates to information seeking strategies. Which of these sources is best for the student who's looking for information on the migration habits of humpback whales or the Plains Indians? And you can use that very one. Then there are also some ones that have to do with either defining some terms, or it might even be the choice of search terms, which would be location and access. One last one is the synthesis, evaluating synthesis. And what I like to do for the upper grades is to look at the citation patterns in a paper, essay, or report. And you can contrast the student that uses just 1 or 2 sources or uses sources in a kind of a linear way versus the student that mixes up and integrates their sources very well. The latter is what we're aiming at, and that's another quick, easy way to assess information skills. What I'd like to see us do is to share on a national level all these different techniques that relate to different information skills. So Mike, you say report out on these skills, but how do I do that if I can't get on the report card? Well, I think, and particularly for you teacher librarians in the audience, the way to do this, the way to fame and fortune, is send a monthly letter out to every parent, every caregiver and guardian on that student's performance in this month on information literacy skills. What parent is not going to want to get to find out, how's Logan doing on information literacy this month, the specific skill that we've decided to focus on this month perhaps. So maybe we're in November, and November is location and access month, and we're focusing on location skills and doing that within the context of a paper or a report that Logan is doing on the planets. And what we do is to look to see, and we teach how he's doing on location, using search tools, using some of the ABC-CLIO databases or some of the magazine databases, the online catalog, and then we assess it and we report back on that. You see, I'm Logan's grandfather, by the way, and I want to know how he's doing on information literacy because it is just as important, if not more important, frankly, than any other subject area. So that's what I mean by reporting. And maybe if you don't do it every month, do it every 2 months, but report back substantively on the information literacy level of every child in the school. Ultimately, we should be pushing for a report card line item on information literacy in the same way we have math and science and social studies and English and so forth. Okay, Mike, we're just about out of time. Here's my last question, but I don't have time to do all this. Mike, how do we do everything that you're asking? Great question. I think it goes back to my earlier discussion of things, and that is that we need to focus on the essential learnings for every grade level. These are essential. They're not optional. And therefore, we need to determine the ones that we really want to have learned, to plan it out, and it may be coming up with a lot more systematic, a lot more predictable and organized curriculum than we're used to in the library programs of the past, where it's very free-form and open, and it's tied to the needs of the students and the teachers, and it changes and whatever. And while that's really nice, I'm not sure we can do that. I think we need a much more predictable, let's look for the assignment in November that really suits the Logans of the world learning their location and access skills. And in January, let's really focus on use of information skills and figure out the 2 or 3 assignments that we're going to focus on that and how we're going to do that in a very efficient way. So that's one of the ways that we do it in terms of time. The other time thing is it needs to become a school priority, and we have to figure out of how we integrate and organize this within the school day, the school week, month, and the school year. So that's a quick overview of the topic of accountability on information literacy programs. I want to thank ABC-CLIO again for the opportunity to present this, and I want to thank you, the audience, for taking the time to watch. This is Mike Eisenberg signing off saying, think big, 6.